Well, here's something spicy. New bombshell whistleblower revelations on the origins of COVID-19 have come in, and it is not looking good for the natural origins crowd. New reporting alleges that the CIA offered to pay off analysts in hopes of burying their findings that COVID-19 was likely leaked from a lab. Wow. Tuesday, the House Coronavirus Subcommittee and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence notified the CIA Director, William Burns, of these startling allegations. According to a high-level CIA officer, 6 officers of the CIA were given a, quote, significant monetary incentive to change their position on the origins of the virus.
The committees have set a September 26th deadline for the CIA to turn over all records regarding the establishment of COVID-19 discovery teams. They've also asked the former chief operating officer at the agency, Andrew McCridis, to participate in a voluntary transcribed interview. Molecular biologist and author Alina Chan noted on X, if this whistleblower is telling the truth, that means 1, 6 out of 7 CIA analysts leaned toward lab origin of COVID. 2, someone with authority talked to the 6 analysts talked them down from a lab origin assessment. 3, 4 agencies, FBI, DOE, CIA, DIA's scientific experts leaned toward lab origin.
Yeah, so this is big, and we should say, of course, we were not able to independently verify the allegations. The whistleblower's identity has not been made public yet. I hope we'll be hearing more from this person, including, I hope, on the record. We learn who he is and what his connection to this is, he or she, and what they know. But the allegation essentially is that there were 7 analysts for the CIA looking at whether a lab leak or natural origin was more likely, and 6 of the 7 concluded the lab leak was more likely. And then, according to this whistleblower, those 6 were offered a financial incentive to concur, to change their mind and concur with the 7th, who said that it was more likely animal spillover, and that's why the CIA made that conclusion. Obviously, some agencies have split.
Right.
We famously talked about how the FBI and the Department of Energy, which runs a lot of labs and has a lot of specific knowledge of this kind of thing, have concluded that the lab leak is more likely. This is, I mean, it's big if true, obviously, but it would be huge. And you know, look, it's not. It is a sensational claim. It's bribing government officials to change their analysis. But I have to say, after seeing all the Slack and email messages from the doctors, the medical advisors in conversation with Fauci when the proximal origin paper comes out, and how their minds changed like that, seemingly because of political pressure, you know, this is not that far afield of that.
What is the incentive at this point, 3 years out? It doesn't even feel like an especially controversial issue anymore. The idea, I mean, we don't know when the bribes were supposed to have taken place. Maybe it was in an earlier period of time. But the question remains, why does it seem to be the case that there was so much investment in lab leak origin not being validated by our government as the likely origin of the COVID virus, of the COVID pandemic? And I do keep coming back to this question of liability. That seems to me the only reason why it matters is if the U.S. government or some other affiliated party is on the hook for the billions or maybe even trillions of dollars of cost when you factor in the incalculable value of human lives lost, not to mention all of the economic damage that was done by this pandemic. And if that's the case, oh my gosh, we are going to have a whole community of Americans feeling like they can't trust their government, they can't trust what we're being told, misinformation running amok all over the place, all because there is a limited quantity of people who have financial exposure. And also, are we saying that accountability doesn't matter at all if there are parties that should have known that the safety requirements at the lab weren't up to snuff, or that they shouldn't have been funding this research in the first place? What does that mean prospectively for assessment of risk and mitigating danger going forward if we're never going to have an accountability moment here because they will never even admit that the virus even came from the lab in the first place? That's my concern.
Yeah, seems like it's some version of you can't handle the truth of exactly what you're saying, that it reflects very poorly on
well, they
certain
can't handle the truth. They can't handle the truth because they might have to pay up.
Well, you can't handle it, right? You can't handle it. By handle it, I mean you're going to demand accountability if you learned. You're going to lose your mind at how badly we, the government, or aspects of the government, screwed up. It was a real light bulb moment for me when we interviewed that author who'd written a book about previous lab leaks over history, explaining that when there were Soviet lab leaks, that got people killed, instead of using that, at the height of the Cold War, instead of using that moment to kind of stick it to the Soviet Union, Western scientists pretended that nothing had emerged from the lab because they thought it would look bad for them. Then people would start looking, well, what are you doing with your? There was more like professional solidarity than there was geopolitical concern, and that worries me that something along those lines is going on here. Yeah,
and I'm not even one of those people that says, well, you made a mistake, so we have to shut down this whole line of scientific inquiry. If it can be demonstrated that stuff can be done safely because you're in a lab in Antarctica or whatever safety precautions need to exist.
The moon sounds like the right place.
Like, I'm open to it. But if they're going to be this hostile to even having the conversation and have this kind of professional gatekeeping instead of actually working to reform their practices, then I am going to be increasingly inclined to say, fine, then shut it all down.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, Senator Rand Paul zeroed in on the Democrats' persistent refusal to get to the bottom of where COVID came from. Here he is on the Senate floor.
We're the only ones that have been trying to figure out where this virus came from. For the last 3 years, I've been asking every day, did this virus escape from a lab? And not one Democrat will stand up and say, I'll help you find out. We'll look at it together. Every Democrat has said, we don't care, we don't know, and we don't want to know where the virus came from. But if it came from a lab, maybe we should quit funding this research. Should we quit sending our money to China, to a lab that operates in an unsafe manner?
It is so. We've commented on this before. Why on earth this even needs to be it doesn't need to be a political issue.
Right.
It really doesn't need to be a political issue.
Well, and I do think he's overstating that somewhat. I remember just off the top of my head that Ro Khanna has been open to lab leak theory. There have been Democrats, but sure, he's correct that it has fallen largely among partisan lines for reasons that, again, make no sense. Any Democrat could get so much credibility by just saying, oh yeah, the CIA, the DOE, there are government officials who are saying this is a valid theory. Of course, I can trust some wings of our government at least express an openness to lab leak being real.
Frankly, the mainstream media has been worse than the Democrats or the Democratic elected officials. I've heard more nonsense on this subject from cable news hosts, mainstream writers from mainstream publications, honestly, than I have from Democratic politicians. Let's be perfectly fair. Let's point out who the guilty parties are. It's the Washington Post screaming that this is a racist conspiracy theory. It's this getting dismissed by Joy Reid and co night after night. Even when more evidence came out that it's much more likely than was previously allowed to be. It's the browbeating of social media companies for allowing any discussion of this. It's that kind of thing. Frankly, it's more so the media.
It's certainly not the American public, 2/3 of whom
the majority believe it.
That it's lab leak. So I don't know who they're preaching to from the pulpit of big natural origin. I don't know what the political advantage is of staking that.
But
claim.
people like Alina Chan, who we've had on the show before, and who is a major proponent of who wants to investigate. She's open to either explanation, but she points to all the ways she has suffered and been stigmatized and been harassed and targeted by, I know it sounds a little ridiculous to say big natural origin, but by science and health commentators who actually have pushed that in such an aggressive, blinding way since the beginning, shutting down those lines of inquiry. And to a degree, Fauci and the other people who participated in proximal origins did that as well. And maybe the CIA. This is fascinating. We will absolutely try to have more reporting on this and try to confirm some of those claims, and look forward to eventually knowing, I hope, who this whistleblower is. I know a lot of these people want to remain secret to protect their job or protect other things, but this is so important and so significant, and it probably will only make a splash if the person comes forward, or if they have some very ironclad documents to provide. At the very least, we would like to see documents. More Rising right after this.